Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
This is another beautiful 1975 summer's day here on the coast with Dazzler and the boys. Bit of summer love here on 94.7 The Pulse. Neil and Rob spinning the platters that matter. Sorry, I just had a moment back there in time there, Robert Cameron.
Gracious. Bit of Casey Kasem. Oh, hell.
Here in America. Hi, this is Casey Kasem.
Speaking of going back in time, a bloke who's been doing stuff for 41 years now, and we love having him on the show. Ian Cover in transit to do the Coodabeen Champions. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. Good morning, Neil. Great to hear you spinning them this morning on 94.7 The Pulse. I'll be twisting your wrist and climbing your spine. Summer love. Wonderful stuff.
Oh, dear.
We can DJ off.
Hey, I'll give you a traffic update now. On the Westgate Freeway, traffic is light.
Figured that might be the case.
Yeah.
You probably get there early today and surprise everyone.
Yeah, so it's been a great run this morning. A bit of rain about, so take your care out there. I can't stop it now.
In the white thunder flying over the top of the lower Yarra Reaches.
Oh, dear.
People I've worked with in radio over the years used to give me that sort of talk, and I just thought they did it for the couple of hours they're on air. But they talk like that. You'd run into them in the corridor and you say, how you feeling today, Mick? I'm fine and mild.
Oh, dear. Okay, good to have you on. We thought it'd be it's a while since we've had you, but the homecoming of Stephen Hawking being a Cat fan, that's the centrepiece. That's got to be good news, hasn't it?
Oh, terrific news, yeah. And it was nice to read where Stephen, I think, indicated that really that's the job he'd always, wanted. The one he really craved was being CEO of Geelong Football Club rather than working for the AFL because, he's a Geelong boy through and through, although he did come from Cobram.
He did. Funnily enough, we had him in this studio, it must have been about 4 3/4 years ago, because it was just before he was appointed to his AFL position, and you could tell that his life was Geelong, and he certainly was. He didn't come out and say it, but he was the heir apparent to Brian Cook. The trip to the AFL surprised me, and I thought maybe it wouldn't have happened because the AFL were probably aware that he was going to be Brian Cook's replacement. I thought it was an odd replacement. Do you think they'd be a bit peeved with him leaving?
Oh, yes and no. Who knows how the AFL thinks and works. Look, you'd like to think they take the same attitude that Brian Cook and the football club's always had about its people moving on to other things. They always say, wish them well and good luck to you. So the AFL's got a lot more challenges than worrying about their 2IC leaving. It's a real challenge to get the footy happening at the moment. And whilst that is happening, and well done to them, of course, it overshadows the fact that our local and community sport is once again shelved for another weekend. Yeah,
it's not good. There was a lot of there's a lot of hype around the local footy here, as you've got a sort of foot in the Bellarine camp with a couple of clubs. You know how exciting that's going. The Geelong and district that I cover is really interesting, and certainly there's a bit of a log jam at the bottom part of the 5 in the GFL, so everyone was up and about. Of course, the netball as well, so just a bit of a dull weekend.
Yeah, and you would have seen it in going off to the footy you go to, that the crowds have been enormous at local footy when it's been on this year. I think people just enjoyed going off to the local footy and the local netball and just catching up with the family and friends. Yeah,
definitely. There's no doubt about that. The place is alive and well with sport, and I guess after being locked up for a little while, it was always going to happen. But that great sense of community is back, and it's probably the reason why Victoria has performed pretty well. I think we've got a darn good sense of community here that maybe in Sydney, Neil, might not be quite as pronounced.
Yeah, I think that the troops are starting to get a little bit agitated now. They, at the risk of sounding political, and I've said this before, I think the leadership that has been shown by St Gladys has been much more collaborative than the one in Victoria, and I think, unfortunately, people have taken advantage of that a bit. Because why wouldn't you drive 25 kilometres across Sydney to go to walk on Bondi Beach with 9,000 other people per square metre? It's just been a bit ridiculous. And Centennial Park, the first weekend of the lockdown, for those who don't know, that Centennial Park is kind of the central meeting place in Sydney, and you could not get a park, as in a car park. So people were coming literally from everywhere to walk around the park when there's one just over the road here. So it's crazy stuff. I wasn't one of those, by the way. I saw it on the news.
What's things like in Barwon Heads, Cove? Pretty quiet down there?
Very quiet last night in particular, yes. A lot of people in Barwon Heads having to quarantine at the moment. So,
yes.
It's very quiet indeed. I was just going to say, Neil's observations there of life in Sydney and some people being a little bit disobedient. Never lose sight of the fact that the first people to inhabit Sydney were in fact convicts, and it has been forever in the DNA of Sydney.
Well, at the risk of getting ourselves a little bit political here, Ian, the first inhabitants of the folk in Sydney were interrupted by some convicts turning up. They had been here for about 40,000 years, it is said.
Well, okay, I stand corrected on that. I think you know where it was coming from.
No, exactly
and
what
they
you
said,
mean, yeah.
It has been a long, long time, they said.
Right.
It
So
has
did that
indeed.
been along?
Just going to make one other observation, re Stephen Hawking, before we go to the next topic. I didn't know Stephen. I think a lot of people know Stephen for his time in Geelong, and I actually sent him a message to congratulate him, and so looking forward to seeing you back at Geelong. And I just sent a text, and I'm not betraying any confidences here. He rang me back 2 minutes after I'd sent the text for a chat, and I think that just shows, the sort of down-to-earth, accessible person Stephen Hawking is, and he'd be great for the football club.
Yeah, and I can add to that a little. You may or may not be familiar with a fellow named Barry Sparrow Stevens, who's a winch icon. He knew Stephen very well from his picture framing days, had a shop next door to each other, and Stephen was very much in the AFL job at the time, but he still took the time out to attend Sparrow's funeral in Winch, and I think that's a testament to the character of the man.
Yeah, mentioning the picture framing shop, I did get some picture framing done by Hock back in the day, and even though he was, truly ensconced in his picture framing business, you popped in there to drop off your picture to be framed, had a half-hour discussion about football, went back to pick it up when it was ready, and had an hour discussion about football.
The thing, as the non-Geelong supporter in this conversation, I don't, they've said that there's some issues around the bloke who's been running the AFL coming and now running a club, and in the same week, Geelong end up on top of the ladder. Now, I'm not the kind of bloke that draws conclusions, but, should I be worried?
Not at all. The fact that Geelong was on top of the ladder is all their own work.
Nicely returned over the net that time.
You
can't have a good conspiracy theory, though.
And how come your mob played so well against Geelong when they played them, unlike last night when they let Richmond beat them?
That was hard to watch.
It was the man with no surname's 300th game, apparently. I did hear someone called Jack. And there was a bloke playing in the last quarter, kicked a goal. His name was Rewalt. I didn't know who he was.
I thought it was Kieran Jack and made a comeback.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? But yes, it's interesting. The last three of the last four games, the team from Brisbane have managed to do really well till half time against Melbourne and Richmond and St Kilda. They come out after half time and they're just zonked. And I think it's getting to the stage where young Chris Fagan might be getting a little bit concerned about their ability to run out a game.
Yeah, very odd, because it just seemed that I thought they were on top and got a couple up, and then missed a couple they should have got early in that third quarter to put a bit of
broke the momentum,
distance in it. Yeah.
I think the other thing too is Richmond apparently they had a last minute change of venue, and that they did remarkably well at not to have any impact. Apparently Brisbane didn't have a last minute venue change, nor did they fly to Melbourne and fly back. Richmond had to fly to Queensland to play the game apparently.
Yeah, there's some remarkable things going on at the moment with that, the way people are responding, and it's seems to go against what you think's going to happen.
Yeah, true. Now, Cove,
I've got to talk footy for the next 2 hours, so I can have a rest for a moment.
you will indeed. We're going to ask you a question. That you spread yourself around the countryside in your work and you meet some wonderful people. I know you are on very good terms with David Parkin, one of our guests this morning, but have your paths ever crossed with the great Russell Morris?
Oh, yes, indeed. In fact, my brothers who are a little bit old in Highton, they went down to Lawn one weekend back in the summer of '69.
Thank you, Brian Adams.
And they came home after that weekend and said they'd been to the Lawn Surf Club on the Saturday night and they saw a band called Somebody's Image with this bloke out the front singing who was fantastic. And that was, of course, Russell Morris.
It was indeed.
Singing, Hush, Hush. I heard her calling my name now, Hush, Hush.
You're wasted doing that footy stuff. You should be doing music.
You should. No, he is one of the Australian music icons without doubt, and we're very privileged to have him on this morning and really looking forward to it. And he's still probably something beyond 70, working beautifully. His voice has only got better.
Now, you've taken the words right out of my mouth.
Meatloaf.
That I was going to say, Russell Morris, his voice is better than ever. It's just incredible. We had Russell actually on the Coodabeen Sunday night show a few years ago, and he told this fantastic story about the making of The Real Thing, which of course is, in Australian folk music folkloric history, about Molly Meldrum producing it. And someone came in, I think, from the record company, and they didn't like what was happening and demanded that Molly hand the tapes over. And Russell told this screamingly funny story about Molly grabbing the master tape and running out of the building across Elbert Park, through Elbert Parklands, being chased with the master tape under his arm.
Yes, I've spoken to Russell. He's told the same story. I've got visions of Molly running.
Sadly, it wasn't portrayed in the Molly mini-series. It would have been a fantastic scene.
Might get Samuel Johnson to run that far.
And Russell's got radio connections too, because he's great mates with a mutual friend of mine, and Russell's Darren James from 3AW
yes.
fame. And they became mates, I don't know, and they used to play golf once a week a lot. I'm going to ask Russell how his golf's going, because they were right into it there for a while, but we might have dropped off.
We certainly won't be talking about footy with him. He's a Richmond supporter.
No, keep that under the hat. Cove, the Coodabeen's still doing what you do best. We don't want our listeners leaving prior to 11 o'clock, so we'll have a bit of mutual respect here. But after 11 o'clock this morning on Coodabeens, what might we hear from you boys?
That's a very good question. I haven't printed the running sheet. I think
you have a run sheet.
Yeah, we do. It's got a bit that says 10:05 start and a bit that says 12 finish. Now we're talking to a woman up in Mildura who's heavily involved in women's footy up there, and then our other guest in the second hour of the program, we're going to be talking to Adrian Gags Gallagher, who was one part of. Now people always talk about Burke, Barrett, and Clay as one of the great lines in football history. I reckon Nichols, Silvani, Gallagher is up there too.
Yeah, with Scott, Tuck and Matthews, they're the three classics. And, yeah, we're going to get on to the great Serge Silvani this morning. You would have, no doubt, be well aware of the incredible dynasty of that family. But did you ever get to meet the great Sergio?
No, never met Sergio. No, sadly. I'm certainly aware of his role, because he did, apart from playing, he was on the committee, he was on match committee, all sorts of things around the club, just synonymous with the old dark navy blue.
And he coached them in 3 games of VFL football as well in 1978.
Now, was that when Ian Thorogood was not coaching at the time, or?
Either it would have been Jezza around about I don't know, maybe Jezza going off to St Kilda, I don't know exactly, but it was certainly 78.
At the end of 79, Jezza left because he coached the premiership side, or coached the grand final side in 79, did he not? Not quite.
That is correct.
So Serge must have been in the Thorogood mix before that. Very quiet character, not quite as quiet as Bruce Dool perhaps, but just sort of went about his job. But you could say that he was an ungainly player at best, Cove?
Yeah, and I reckon playing word association, if you say Sergio Silvani, the first thing I think of is socks down.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. One of the early ones.
Well, in there, everyone had their socks pulled up and had garters on, but he always had the socks down, Sergio, and quite often in the long sleeves.
And ran probably similar to a concreter or he just had a horrible running gait, but he just kept getting to where he needed to get. And as you said, working at the feet of the great John Nichols, you'd probably get a bit of easier work than most.
And in an era, of course, these days where we've always got people wearing baseball caps, I would expect to see Serge with a hanky with a knot in each on his head.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Oh dear. Well, Cove, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. Good luck with your own show after 10 o'clock this morning, the 41st year of Coodabeen Champions. Appreciate and love what you guys do. I'm looking forward to hearing maybe a bit of Timmy and Digger on my way home this morning.
Thank you for that, and all the best to you up there in Sydney, Neil.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for the nudge in terms of getting the software organised to allow us to do this, because it almost sounds like I'm in Geelong.
Oh, it's fantastic. You're sounding better than me.
Good on you, buddy. All the very best. Look forward to our next chat.
And goodbye to your listeners. Love them all.
See you, buddy. All the best. He is a good lad, is Ian Cover. Oh, good friends of his. Now Russell Morris and David Parkin will be joining us after. Now Russell Morris and David Parkin will be joining us after. Now Russell Morris and David